Well, hey, everybody, welcome to Career Lab, and we are happy to see you. This is, of course, the virtual version of Career Lab, and we're happy to be together with you and be able to share all the material we do on Career Lab with you. I'm the host of Career Lab. My name is Joel Siegel. I'm a business coach, and of course, the star of Career Lab, America's Career Counselor. On her phone today is Julie LaCroix, and there you are, my dear. How are you?
I'm doing great, Joel. How are you today?
I'm doing okay, and it's wonderful for us to see each other again.
Yeah.
The pandemic
been a while.
has, kind of taken us off.
Created a lot of separation.
Too much separation, really.
Yeah.
So here's a big kiss from me to you.
Yes.
And now we can get started with the show.
All right.
We're glad to see and hear everyone today. And today we have some very interesting guests that we want to bring on the show. This is our first show using Zoom. So we're going to develop a platform, and you'll probably be able to not only hear the show as you always do, get the podcast wherever you get your normal podcasts at iTunes or Stitcher or whatever application you use. And then also you'll be able to see some clips because we'll post some on our LinkedIn feeds. So having said that, Julie, who did you have as our first guest today?
Well, today we are going to be talking to Tony. Tony is a private client of mine, but he's making a major transition, and one that not every listener makes, but a lot of people will be able to relate to the magnitude of the transition, because the feelings that come up with this type of transition are going to feel very recognizable to a lot of listeners. He's moving from a very advanced academic career into the business world, and that's a very sharp transition. It's very obvious. We're going from one entirely different paradigm into the business paradigm. And so there are natural, emotions that get kicked up, feeling stuck, not really sure where to go, a little disoriented, probably some fear, maybe feeling underdeveloped in terms of business contacts to reach out to. It's kind of like moving to a new state, where you don't really have any friends and you have to get a job and meet your neighbors and join community groups and churches and things like that to start to integrate. And so we're going to be talking with Tony about those fears of moving from one environment to another, and then how he's processing it and what steps he's taking and what his goals are. And then maybe we'll give him some practical advice at the end too. But it's amazing working with anybody in any magnitude of a transition, just how simple it can be if you get your idea together and then back it up into small steps and just walk it forward one step at a time. And that's really the name of the game. So it's part strategy, part kind of emotional management, and part just, keeping that momentum going forward. So let's bring them on.
Hey, Tony. Good morning. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Just fine. How are you?
Good, Tony. I'm Joel Siegel, the host, producer of Career Lab. And of course, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Tony.
Really glad to have you on the show this morning.
Tony, I gave everybody, all the listeners, a little bit of background on your transition out of academia and into the new paradigm of the business world. And those are two very, very sharply contrasted environments. And so I thought having you on the show would be a really wonderful opportunity to illuminate some of the anxieties and fears and disorientation feelings that go with making any kind of transition, whether it's large or small. But because yours is obviously a little more complex and a little more obvious than, say, going from one marketing job at one company to another marketing job at a different company, where the transition is really not a role change, but it's just a company change and a culture change. You're doing a role change, an industry change. You're really changing big time here. And so I thought maybe the listeners could just hear a little bit from you about where you started, where you are now, where you'd like to be, and kind of break it down for them a little bit. Just give us a 3 or 4 minute discussion, if you will, and then we'll try to bump you later in the call to the next step, because I understand from our work together and our communications recently that you've identified a career path that you'd like to walk forward into, and Joel and I would love to help you get there.
All right, great. Yeah. So I guess to start out, so I feel like transitioning from academia to more of a business or corporate setting, it's not just a career shift, but I also felt like it was a pretty big identity shift for me.
It is.
Because I felt like my entire career as a student, like, because I decided when I was a sophomore in my undergrad that I wanted to pursue the path of being a tenured professor, because at that time I was very much drawn to the freedom, and I just loved being around people who were just so passionate about their work and
Sure.
doing something very tangibly beneficial for the community in the future. So it's something that I just carried with me for about 14 years. That was really the only career path I had in mind all throughout my undergrad and throughout my grad school. And I was just so sure the entire time that I would become a tenured professor, but I just didn't know about the statistics, and there really is a lot more work that goes into it than just getting your dissertation, going to a postdoc. And
Tony, let me just break in and ask you for our viewers and listeners, what area are you in, and what is your academic area, and what do you teach?
Wait, hold on. I have to set this up for everybody listening. Buckle up, because this is actually, in my opinion, I've worked with a lot of PhDs, and I mean, they're all formidable. This is fascinating to me. So that you have a very unique niche. Go.
yes, so my background is educational psychology. I got into it. I started out very much with a cognitive science background because I wanted an interdisciplinary approach to studying intelligence and creativity. But as I was finishing up my undergrad, I started getting a lot more interested in the creativity aspects. And while I was in grad school, I started taking some classes in cognitive science, but I was also starting to see that cognitive science kind of had limits to understanding creativity, because by focusing too much on mental processes, I was ignoring a lot of the social and cultural aspects of creativity. So I felt like educational psychology was a better fit for me because it allowed me to look at human behavior and human learning in the context of cultures and institutions. So I just felt like it was a better fit for me. I felt like creativity is bigger than intelligence, because most cognitive scientists would probably say creativity is a subset of intelligence, but I'm thinking it's the other way around, because there are so many behaviors we do that shape and redirect our intention. So with creativity, I did have to work within the school of education because most academic fields don't have a specific program dedicated to that study. So we have to make our home in an adjacent program. In my case, it was educational psychology. In the case of my master's advisor, it was educational psychology and education policy. With my doctoral advisor, it's educational psychology and informatics. So by default, just by studying creativity, I had to learn how to make myself and make my area of interest valuable and important to other people.
So have you been then teaching so sort of specifically about creativity in the educational psychology field? Has that been your specialization as a professor?
No,
Or
that was when I was a grad student, because usually doctoral students at my university were often given funding packages. So I had a 2-year funding package where I did teach an ed psych class, and creativity was a part of it because I did get a lot of arts education majors as students. So it was just a very natural kind of thing, but that was not my focus. The majority of my time has actually been on the research side of things, working as a graduate research assistant.
So the thing that's most fascinating to me about Tony's area is that, I would agree, just from a layman's, point of view, creativity, some people have it, some people don't. And what Tony's really doing is he's trying to measure and understand creativity as a form of intelligence, and then enable a way of learning creativity and becoming more creative. And if I may be so bold as to summarize what you've told me, Tony, and certainly correct me if I don't have it accurately, what Tony would like to do is to help an organization, a creative organization, be more creative. So he would like to be in some kind of creative leadership role across an organization where creativity has proven to be a cornerstone of the organization's output, and work with the workforce and lead some of the projects and some of the project directors on how to harness the creativity of their teams, not necessarily drive the direction of a project. That would probably be a fun thing to do for you as well, but to ensure that the maximum output of creativity is there for an organization across the entire enterprise, and that all of that creativity is adding value to the culture, continually defining the culture and defining the scope and output of the projects themselves, and in turn, the reputation of the company and the impact that that company can make. So I hope I've summarized that okay.
That's a pretty good way of putting it. One thing I would also add is that what most people believe is that creativity is something that is inborn in people.
Right.
I would argue it's more of a consequence of the environment and the tools in place. So, but I'm hoping to become a creative director so that I can implement these different resources, rules, and structures so that people can collaborate. So that way the system is conducive to creativity. It's kind of like gardening, where sure, there are some seeds that might be better than others, but if you have good soil, good resources, you can have a good garden overall.
That's a wonderful analogy. I remember when I was living, I'm not really a funny person. I wasn't really born with it. But when I lived in New York, I was working on a trading desk full of clowns. I mean, these guys and girls were hysterical. And I came home for vacation just to visit my mom and dad. And my mom was having, I think, a Christmas party or a holiday party of some kind. And everybody was just cracking up at everything said. And I couldn't believe, my mom said, "You got really funny." And I'm like, "I did? Like, I'm not a funny person. Nobody's ever laughed at my jokes." And I think it was being in that environment that like you said, when you're exposed to the tools and the resources, you tend to adapt to your environment. So I guess I was able to, I don't know, bust a few out. That was I wish I could still do it.
Well, I think we'd all agree that, there are both endogenous and exogenous elements to the creative process. That's pretty clear. And we probably won't go beyond that with this, but where we should go right now, Tony, would be for me to ask you, since I work in a lot of different industries, I think it's very interesting that you want to make this transition in terms of being a creative director, what you've described. One of the problems is that a lot of industries don't feature not only a creative director, but any creativity. In fact, they're organizationally structured and their cultures are designed to inhibit creativity. So one question for you is, have you thought about the sector or segment, where you think you might want to go, where you might have a better chance to implement some of these ideas you're planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have absolutely been thinking about that as well. So Julie knows that in recent weeks, I had been listening and watching a lot of YouTube videos about people who have succeeded as creative directors. And one of the things that they said is, just like what you said, Joel, is there are a lot of companies that prioritize efficiency. Like they're not so concerned about innovation. They're concerned about efficiency. Like Walmart is a very famous example of that. They just want everything done as quickly and cheaply as possible. If that's what they want to do, then that's what they want to do. But I guess for me, I would want to seek out those companies where they prioritize people and prioritize innovation. So I would have to seek out those companies that are more specifically aligned to the sorts of mission and vision that I see, because I feel like it's a goodness of fit sort of thing. Because a lot of my research in grad school is based on, I don't know if you're familiar with the Russian developmental psychologist Lev Vygotsky.
No, I'm not, but I'd like to be. Go ahead.
Learning.
So just in brief, Vygotsky was a developmental psychologist who believed that learning happens best in when we're all engaging in these activities that are just slightly out of our reach. But if we have the proper tools, environments, and support systems in place over the long term, as we participate in these environments, we will with all this assistance, it's going to elevate our unassisted ability so that these
Absolutely.
things are within reach. And as we are participating in these sorts of succeeding in accomplishing these tasks, there are some qualitative changes that happen within the individual. So then over time, you can take away these support systems, and our unassisted ability is now higher.
Yeah, I am familiar
So,
with that research. I just didn't know
okay.
the guy's name, but I am familiar with that. And that's a very
Stair
that's a
stepping.
very challenging, it's a very interesting proposition. I don't think it's actually been fully developed in the workplace. So I'm glad to hear you thinking about doing that. And you're going to need, as you know, Julie, a very sort of particular environment where you can
Yes.
translate that particular idea. For example, what's interesting is if you look at, you've mentioned innovation a couple of times, and we all know that many new age companies are focused on innovation, many high-tech companies, et cetera. But what we notice about many of those companies is they're not very well organized around innovation. I work for a company now where they just have a room of 20-year-olds, you know, just doing code and writing stuff, but it's very disorganized. There aren't any roadmaps and the things you're trying to develop. So it's possible you might be able to bring some of that to a company that you would work for. Julie, is that something you and Tony have talked about?
Not yet, but I think you're spot on, Joel. With the advancement of policy, STEM policy, science, technology, engineering, arts now, and math, companies are recognizing that creativity is tantamount to standing out. Any product will look like another one in today's age of abundance. And so it's creativity and emotion that make a product or a service unique. And so the companies who are adapting to kind of the STEAM model, if you will recognize the need for more creativity. Obviously, consumer goods, where design is a significant part of product development, would be a wonderful starting place for you, Tony. And, you know, to Joel's point, you know, it's going to be feel a little bit new to kind of sell your value to a company from a creativity standpoint. I think the first round of interviews for you and your first step, that will be, you know, it's going to be hard for some people to connect those dots, just like it's going to feel hard for you to connect those dots. That's why we do this estimating ahead of time. We estimate where you're going to fit and how to articulate it to get you in the door. And then once you're working and you start to make an impact, you're going to have some measurable results and some real life examples of projects and successes under your belt that you can then take to your next company. So you're probably going to walk your career path forward for a job or two. And then by the time you get into your third or fourth, you're going to feel like you really are carving a path and making a big difference. And you'll also be exposed to other creatives within the business environment who will easily adapt just by the nature of their worldview, their lens of creativity to your way of thinking and getting people to build more creativity into their output. I'd like to circle back
Could I
to,
just jump in for 1
oh,
minute, Julie,
sure.
just to
Yeah, yeah,
follow
yeah.
up on something you said, because I think it's actually pretty critical to what you were saying about Tony's process of meeting with companies and potentially landing somewhere.
Mhm.
I think this is a key point in our coaching with you today, this morning, Tony, and that is that I can tell the language you speak. I have a PhD in psychology. I know what you're talking about. I know exactly where you are. But the way you describe your orientation towards creativity and the development of it institutionally, I feel like you're going to run into a lot of people who do not speak your language.
Right.
They are way below where your language is, and their version of creativity is blue instead of red or black instead of white. But what I think you need to do, and this is kind of a risk, but I just want to give it to you, is that you try to continue to speak your language, because somebody will hear you. Some person who's really bright at a company will go, this guy understands a vision of where we might actually go. And so instead of dialing down your own repertoire of responses, I want you to stay at the high level you're at, and hopefully you'll find someone who says, this is a person we really want on our team. I just wanted to put that in there.
And I would agree with Joel 100%, Tony, for what it's worth here, because you're moving into a relatively new frontier. So you
Right.
might as well lead as the best
Right.
in the business. Let people know that they're getting the real deal here. You're a gem for a company that wants to be highly creative. I'd like our listeners to understand a little bit about your personal experience, your emotional experience, your feeling of disorientation, blocks, fears, excitement, anything that you have, good or bad. Give us a little bit of show us that layer, please.
Okay. So in the past 2 weeks, I had been doing some job researching about creative director positions and everything that they describe in their job searching. I find like 8 out of 9 of those categories I can do right away. Like once I notice stuff like leadership skills, that's definitely something I have. Since I had been involved in a lot of amateur improv companies throughout, like over the past 9 years. I perform professionally now, but it's all this stuff of just getting people to work on a cohesive project without coercion. That's something that we all do. It's kind of an anarchist structure where there's no rigid punishment or reward system in place. It's a system we all prefer. So I developed a skill for building relationships. And also because of my experience, I'm not being funny right now, but I have been performing improv comedy for 9 years. So in that experience, I had to learn to put people first. People are way more important than any of our performances because our performances don't last. Once it's done, but our relationships will carry with us from one theater to another, show after show. So I started putting people first, taking care of the people who do create rather than those products. And
did you say improv comedy? That's what I thought I heard you say.
Yes, that is what I said.
Well,
and there's a lot of work, cross collaboration being done with the improv, I guess, comedy houses and executive coaching to help leaders think on their feet and handle Q&As and work with an audience and be more engaging. So that's another running river that you can, stick your boat in and kind of ping off of that.
So just to go back to what Julie asked, though, because we're going to be short of time, but I think that's a key component. Do you have any other part of your
audio just went out, but I think what he's asking is your own personal emotional experience.
Yeah, so regarding personal experiences, I am excited about these new directions because I do feel like maybe all those disappointments in grad school, maybe I was meant to do this after all, because like 8 of those 9 things are stuff that I do organically as a director and performer. But I guess the one thing that I feel that I am unprepared for at this moment is networking, how to get in, because from doing my research, a lot of creative directors started out as designers or artists. I don't know anything about designing for technology and I'm not that kind of artist. So that's going to be a hurdle I would have to overcome, but I do feel like because I have the leadership skills and the flexibility and the scientific methods all in spades right now, I feel it's probably going to be better for a company long term if they do hire me, because it's going to be much more difficult to train an artist to be a scientist than, because PhDs are, I don't mean to brag, but we are all masters of learning, because a doctor of philosophy is being a doctor of learning and knowledge. And
I think that's your platform right there, Tony. I mean, the fastest way to get the human brain to make a decision, as we all know, is contrast. If you want to see a white piece of paper, put it on a black background, and all of a sudden the brain's going to see it. And I think that if you contrast yourself against all the other creative directors, exactly like you just did, you are going to stand out. And we can work on exactly how to articulate that and tighten that down. But you're over half of the way there. So some scientific
Okay.
language, some PhD language, and then some more kind of civilian language, if you will. That's what I tell my military population: civilianize yourself a little bit here. And that's what we do. That we'll just use that term right now. But
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
going to be he's going to be a standout.
yeah, I mean, I think that, as we wrap up this segment, Tony, I can only say you're a very unusual guest. And, I think our listeners and our viewers have been very fortunate to have a professional like you on the show because, as Julie pointed out at the beginning, this is a very, very interesting transition, and it's a very high level one. I don't think you fully realize how it'll look where you end up. You know what I mean, Julie? I think part of what's exciting about you is you're developing it as you go based on your commitment to everything you've learned and developed in terms of educational psychology and creativity as a learning model, as a developmental model. That's why I said some company will be really lucky to get you. So we are grateful to have had you on, and we would love to have you come back and check in with us. I know you'll be seeing or working with Julie, but really this has been an extraordinary segment, and we're just so happy, aren't we, Julie?
Absolutely. This has been really great. And I just want to, for our listeners, the fear of how to get in and feeling unprepared, and I'm not that kind of artist, or I'm not that kind of person, I'm different. And then the other extreme of feeling excited and hopeful. The middle ground there, I think, Tony, you said it perfectly. And I hope that this is a takeaway for everybody today. Your quote was, "Maybe I was meant to do this after all." And I think that the next decade of your life will take everything that you've already built and give it some magnificent output. That's what we hope for you, that it'll be fruitful. But we'll help you along the way in private work, to get you seated, and then hopefully, like Joel said, have you back on the show.
Wonderful. I would like
Tony,
that.
thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for coming, Tony. Bye.
That was quite a segment, Julie.
Isn't he interesting?
Phenomenally interesting. And we rarely get a person like Tony on the show, and I'm so glad that you were able to source this particular guest for us. And I think that the issues that he speaks to are relevant to a lot of people who have significant intellectual backgrounds, whatever they are, and are trying to bring those into a transition. One of the things we didn't talk about, but I wanted to talk about with you, because I know between you and I, it'll be fun. When you've got a PhD or a lot of educational experience in one area and you're moving from one segment to another, that's tough because you're highly trained in one thing and you're moving to another. I see this, Julie, when I work with lawyers who are transitioning out of law. They really struggle with that. And I remember some years ago back, you referred me a couple of lawyers who were transitioning. And those were outstanding features of those particular engagements, were how much difficulty they had. So, I think that's part of what's going on for Tony.
Yeah, and I've worked with a lot of PhDs actually who follow the same model that Tony is following. It's so much comfort in this soup of academic experience and academic content, and really not a lot of idea on where to take it, how to take it there, or what the options are. And it's a beautiful process to work through with an individual who is as accomplished academically as a PhD is, because they're so passionate about their work and their identity is so tied to it. And every single time there is an occupational alignment. I had a client a few years ago, way back, and she was a PhD whose expertise was studying the marketing of medicines throughout time into communities, like penicillin or whatever. And she had no idea where to take it, didn't think it would be of value at all. And can't you imagine a large pharmaceutical company wanting her to lead the communications and reputation building for their pharmaceutical products? It just takes some education. Just like you wouldn't go to a city without a map, you have to help that client assess where their best occupational categories are and then help them map those out And usually they're perfectly capable of walking it forward. They just need a little bit of guidance. And I think that Tony he's doing a great job.
Tony's perfectly capable of that with you as his career counselor. That's what I think is the main feature there, because I actually think it's quite complex, but I know with you working with him, he's going to get there. Two other things about this guy. Let's have a little fun here at the end.
Yeah.
So one thing that was very unique about Tony was, instead of it being a transition to a sector, for him it's going to be a transition to an organization. That's
Correct.
the point I was making. Some organization is going to recognize what he's got and they're going to grab it. And who knows where it'll be, sector-wise, it could be anywhere. That's what made him special. And the other thing I want to comment on about our guest, because it's great to be able to have people like this on the show. And we've had a lot of very unique guests, but the other thing that was unique for me, and not having met Tony prior to today and not being his coach, was his vibe, if I can put it that way. He came across in a very special way. Many people who are academically loaded, by that I mean well-trained, come across like that. There's kind of a pretentiousness about them, and they're kind of hard to approach. They are distancing, and you feel like you're not as maybe smart as them or as trained or whatever. This guy was the opposite of that. He had an openness, a kind of creative flow about the way he related, which, I'm sure our listeners and viewers will see. And gosh, I wish we all had that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what he's not showing on the show today is his technical background, his analytics background. He really is the full package. He's going to look great on paper. I can't wait to do his resume and bounce him out into corporate America. I know he's going to generate some interest for sure.
Okay. Well, that was a great segment. And we're going to take a little break. Then we're going to come back and going to have another guest, and it's going to be exciting.
That was fun.
Okay, good. So we will see you in a couple of minutes. During the next several episodes of Career Lab, we are going to be tackling issues related to employment during COVID times and after COVID times. And we know this is a huge topic for all of us and everybody out there. So stay tuned. We're going to have some incredible information, guests and callers, and more stuff to find out about how you can manage during this time. So we look forward to meeting with you and having you listen to the podcast. Take care.